Okay, so throughout our MOOC we have inserted quizzes all the way through so our students, participants can test their knowledge and understanding, and I think it breaks up a lot of the teaching content. Do you make use of online quizzes and tools like that in your teaching? Eileen, do you have any experience?
Not so much, because it's tricky if you've got maybe a discursive type of subject, you know, where to make the questions really. But it is an awfully good way to give students feedback about their progress. So, you know, and I'm beginning to see that, you know, you could do a lot more. And I've used polls. You know, when I was talking about the video conference, the students really responded to quick polls all the way through. And after a while, you get used to or get good at kind of thinking up polling questions for every topic you discuss. So I think that's potentially nice. And then with polls, they get the feedback immediately there, you know, so that they'll see what everybody else is thinking.
Steve, have you used quizzes or polls?
Not in the true sense of quizzes. I will often kind of reflect on what we've done in the course. So after about 3 or 4 weeks into a course, the students will be sat in front of me and I'll just say, right, we're going to do a quiz now, very informally, and go over some of the topics we've discussed in the previous weeks, and they're horrified. And it is an iterative process, learning, isn't it? And I think to recall some of the stuff, or actually remember that you can't remember it or recall it in any way, shape or form, is really good. It's really a positive experience. But I don't embed it in any other way than as said then. So maybe I ought to look at a bank of questions that come up every so often. But the other thing I've done also is done some learning objects in Xerti, and they're very specific, tailored to either level 4 or level 5. And at the end of those, there's quizzes, just to see if people have taken in what they've spent 10 minutes doing. So, but that's as far as I go.
What kind of quiz? Is that true, false, or multiple choice?
It's like a true false, so they have to drag labels, put them into the right compartments, and if they get it right, it's a tick. Yeah.
Yeah, so if there are certain categories and certain other things, you have to match up the one with the other, kind of drag and drop. That's not so bad. I know, I mean, I have a big problem with quizzes because so often they're multiple choice, and I hate the business of asking students to think about wrong answers, which is what inevitably multiple choice, plausible distractors, you know, that's the focus. It seems awful to me. So I prefer, if I'm going to use that sort of thing at all, to use what I call concealed multiple choice, where you ask the open question, you get them to write something in, and then you say, which of the following options comes closest to your answer? You've got some hope that they won't just guess, and that they'll won't spend too much time thinking about the other wrong answers or something. So that's about the best I can say for that. But the way we tend to use them in the sort of professional development MOOCs is much more to have the options being different kinds of attitude towards something. And then it's quite interesting to do a sort of before and after comparison of how attitudes shift over a week or over the whole course or something like that. So I think it's quite nice for that kind of thing. But for understanding, students like quizzes because they like that challenge that you just described, Steve, of being challenged on, so what do you know about this? But I think you could probably do that with an open-ended question without necessarily, then of course they don't get the score because you can't score it. So it's a difficult one.
And the way I do it is it's a relatively harmless experience. So yes, they may individually take ownership for not knowing much, but they don't have to express that to anyone. And I'm not marking it out of 10. We're going through, we'll have a group discussion about the answer and move on. And I think it works really well. They do, as you just said, they love it. They really do look forward to it, which is strange, but yeah.
Yeah, but because it's so informative for them.
That's right.
They find out what they don't know, and they thought, you know, all this has been going in, yes, I understand, but
yeah.
And you find you don't. So it's
I often find myself saying, we did this 3 weeks ago, come on, you know.
I wonder if it depends on the context as well as learning, because in medicine and veterinary science, MCQs are used so much because you need to also know what those wrong answers are, because you know you could end up killing an animal or something because you've chosen the wrong type of drug to administer. So I don't know.
Well, I wonder also if it depends on the level, whether it's a level 4, 5 or 6, because in level 4 you've got so many new terms and everything to learn. It's a huge learning curve at that stage. Yet hopefully in level 6 that knowledge, that foundation is there, and they're using that to inform arguments and decisions. So I tend to use it in 4 and 5, but not level 6 so much.
Thank you. In our MOOC, in week 3 of the MOOC, we used a Twitter poll. So we've built on our experience of using Twitter, and we've used it to poll each other. Eileen, you've used polls in web conferencing situations, but Diana or Steve, have you used polling at all, just to get very quick, rapid responses from your students?
No, never done it. I ask questions, get feedback from class that way. But I actually was at a conference once, and a fellow was talking about his first experience about using a polling tool, and he stopped in the middle of his lecture, asked for an answer to a question, and it was, you get the feedback instantaneously. And he said it was the first time he knew for 20 years that students didn't understand what he was saying. So I guess the application and use could be very, very good, but I've not done that so far.
I've used Poll Everywhere in lecture situations. It's really easy to set up. You can use it on mobile devices, phones, or through a browser. And it's when you get that graph building up as more and more people are contributing. It's great to see it visually, and sometimes it's great. It's a great icebreaker right at the very beginning of a lecture or end of the beginning of a series.
I suppose you could use the results of that to reflect on your teaching practice if you need to adjust anything. Because I guess if you find something that's not being learnt very well or hasn't gone into the learning environment very well, you've got to then change your style. And there's an expectation then, isn't there, from the student body that, you know, you've got to do this now.
Yeah, it's important.
Great. Thank you very much. My next topic of conversation is around the detection of plagiarism and text matching. We all use Turnitin in our institutions as the tool to check for this. Have you got any comments or thoughts about the use of plagiarism detection software?
We use Turnitin, and I think you have to be very careful with it. And I'm not happy using it in a punitive sense at the moment, because it does rely on us teaching students how to reference properly, how to avoid plagiarism, and I don't think we do that very well at the moment. I shouldn't say that on camera, but I then therefore use the results of, if you've got a high index score, to look at why the students are doing that and how we've failed them in the sense of not showing them properly or adhering to a certain referencing system. So, but equally, I have found over the last few years that the number of students with high scores, there's a English language problem, so English may be a second language, but there's also a cultural problem there, and it's you know, that's something that we've got to be very careful how we manage.
I think it's important that students are aware of what Turnitin is for and why it's there, and that is part of what they're learning about. But I suppose as we teach mostly graduate students, I think they're more familiar with that now. So I've never experienced a problem with plagiarism with students, but I'm just glad we've got that check, because it gives students some sense of security that this is a fair system, and that's as important as anything else.
Some institutions don't allow their students to access their originality reports, so they just submit their essay and that's it, whereas others will provide that report to their students first as a sort of a first draft of an assignment before they submit it.
That's something we're working on in our department this year, because we've done the exact same in the past, and one student last year sent me a panicked email, I've got 63% similarity index, what am I going to do? So we are now trying to address referencing plagiarism. We are giving them the opportunity to get a report back before final submission. This is all new at the moment, so I haven't got any feedback to give you on how good that is, but my perception is actually the students appreciate it more. So, but I've yet to compile all that data.
I would agree. I think that you should allow students to upload drafts and see, because it's a strange thing, but undergraduate students in particular, they do struggle with getting the idea of referencing, why you have to do it, what it's for, you know, and that is a way of showing them that, you know, why we do it. And also to not sort of think that it just because you've got a high similarity index that automatically means something bad, because it doesn't necessarily. I mean, all your similarities could be your references, or there could be quotes that are absolutely fine. It's just, so it comes back to referencing and how well you've done that.
But it does rely on the academic being explicit about how you do the referencing, how you break things down, how you avoid plagiarism. And I don't think we've done that in our courses enough. I mean, it is implicit, but we haven't explicitly said. And that's what we're addressing as well. Because the onus is on us, and I don't think if students have a high similarity index, that it's necessarily always their fault. It could be part of the way we're instructing them or not instructing them, as the case may be. So I think whatever program you're teaching, whether it's face-to-face or distance learning, there has to be an explicit component.
At the end of our MOOC, our participants will have the option of whether or not they'd like to get a certificate. And along the same vein, I've been thinking about online badges as a way of acknowledging achievement virtually. Eileen, tell me about your experiences of using badges.
Well, I first received a badge when I did a MOOC. A couple of badges, and I'd been very sceptical about them beforehand, but it was just so nice. I just got a little email saying, "Oh, you've got a badge," and I thought, okay, well, I better go and get some more then. And it was probably the only MOOC that I've done religiously all the way through, because I'm not very good at sticking with them necessarily. And I think that they're good for recording that, because since then, because it was a kind of professional development MOOC, I've used the badges to sort of evidence that I've done that kind of learning. But while I was doing it, it was more about kind of feedback, that I'd taken the quizzes, I'd done all the activities, and then I got something back. So I think that they work on different levels, and so we ran just a week-long event where we were trying to teach people about a tool that we've developed, and we use badges for that. We rewarded people with a badge when they signed up, and then when they achieved various things, they got other badges with the same idea, and then that's something they can take away. And the thing about digital badges is that you can see, you can click on them and see all the things that somebody had to do in order to get that badge. So it's great for somebody else looking in, but as somebody who has the badge, you forget all this stuff, all the things that you learned, don't you? I mean, and you just think, well, ages later, you're trying to put something on your CV, you think, oh, I know I did some course whenever. If you've got a badge, you won't forget it. And people tweeted the badges afterwards, so it gives people a way of showing what they did. And they're so easy to set up. I think we use Blackboard. Moodle, it's very easy to use as well to create a badge. Very, very simple. So you just need a good image and some good criteria, and there you are.
All the way through our MOOC, our participants have been given the opportunity to review each other's work in the peer assessment activity. What examples of using peer review have you got in your own practice, Diana, for your students?
Well, one place we used it was in sharing learning designs, because I think it's so important for teachers to be able to represent their pedagogy in some way. So having a tool like the Learning Designer tool. It's an online learning design articulation tool, if you like. And it helps you think about the kinds of learning activities you're building in, because you have to classify each one according to whether it's learning through practice or discussion or whatever. And you get this nice pie chart representation of, you know, how varied a learning experience you've created, which is a kind of feedback in itself, which is quite nice, makes you think. But then if you can send your learning design to other people for review, it's getting to be a little like the sort of scholarship process that we have in every walk of life, in science and humanities, in academia, where you're collectively building the knowledge of your area. And I think with learning design with technology, we need to do that in teaching. We need to know what we know. And by having this kind of tool that enables you to share it, it's very good. So people just had to put onto a Padlet wall a link to their learning design so other people could go and see it. And then you could add your review of someone else's learning design to it, which then went back to the originator. And we got lots of people coming into the forum saying, that was so useful. I think doing the review is more useful than anything else, actually, because it just makes you rethink what you did. But then getting other people's feedback, people are very constructive in the feedback that they offer. And you find the same thing with students when they're commenting on each other's work in a similar kind of context. They're constructive. They may have negative things to say, but they're constructive in their criticism, saying, I can see what you were trying to do here, or I really liked what you did here, but maybe you try this. It's terrific, actually. It really does seem to work well. And as formative feedback, I think it's a great way for people to be learning.
Thank you. Steve, have you used this tool?
I've been very sceptical about peer review, but I did do it last year. And it had amazing results, actually. Normally, a lot of our geology is experiential, so the further you go through the course, the better you should become, particularly at describing rocks, which is quite a big part at level 4, level 5. So rather than just giving feedback from one student to me and my feedback to them, I decided I'd open it up, and I used Panopto as a technology to do this. You can download the recorder to your own computer, and you have a choice of either doing a video or audio cast, as I call them. So they recorded their interpretation of a rock, uploaded it into Moodle, and everybody could see each other's submission. And that was quite a good use of the technology, but the interaction I had with the students was very, very interesting. Some students, although I'd given them an instructional video from Screencast, how to download the Panopto, how to use it, how to upload the material, the technology didn't seem to be any problem to the students. So obviously good instruction is very important, but they were very nervous about other people seeing their work, incredibly so. And some students would actually literally write out their description and then read it verbatim into the audio video recording device. Others found it well, it made them very anxious. Some of this was around a language issue, so English as a second language was a problem. But other students loved it. They could see the benefit, they could see transferable skills. One student commented that it would make them a better presenter, speaker. So it was an eye-opener, but what really I found difficult to accept, because I'd never liked to put students in a pressurised environment, but it did seem to do that to some students. But equally, what was funny was you can look online at the statistics at who looks at whose videos, and the students had ranked, maybe it was non-consensual, but there was a ranking of students, there was a hierarchy, and the perceived top students, everybody was looking at their videos, and the students that were perceived not to do so well had fewer hits. It was incredible. It was really interesting. So the group dynamic is very important, but it does actually bring out the best of students, I think, doing some group work like that. So I will be continuing to do it.
Yeah, I've been surprised when students have said, oh, you know, we always like peer review, you know, because I didn't necessarily think that students would like it so much. I think that on some MOOCs that we've run, there have been some issues around peer review. I think it's, you know, when people don't review in any great detail, that students have, you know, put all that effort in that you're describing to create the assessment, and then, you know, they don't get very much back. They just get, you know, some yeses and nos, and that's it. That can be very frustrating. So I mean, you can't really do very much about that in a MOOC situation, but in a maybe more controlled teaching situation, making it really clear what the expectations are in terms of the feedback, and maybe just rewarding that more than anything else, you know, grading somebody on how much, on their review of somebody else's work, as opposed to the submission itself, or balancing it in some way. Maybe that would change that. But I mean, I was interested in this, you know, how you actually sort of arrange it, because there are very, you know, specialist tools for doing peer review, like the Moodle workshop. It's quite difficult once you get your head around it. You know, it's okay. But you do need sort of almost some confidence to begin with. But you can do it in very, very simple ways. I've used like a survey tool, like what do you call it, that we Survey Monkey, you know, just so that you don't give people the criteria and get them to just like click. I mean, and you don't necessarily need to be very complicated. I mean, your examples, I mean, just making a video and sharing it, or using Padlet.
You do have to introduce it to the students, especially to students. I mean, amongst genuine peers, like in professional development courses, I think it's not so bad, although even there were people in the Coursera one that we ran for teachers who were saying, well, they just didn't read my thing properly, you know, they should have, and are they really competent to judge, and things like that. And I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. And my comment to them was, well, this is the world of peer review, you know, we all experience that. You send a paper to a journal and you think, they just didn't read it. So that can happen, but if you introduce it the right way and you think not too much turns on this, you know, you'll learn more from it than if you don't engage with it. It's not as though that's your assessment, so I don't use it for summative assessment. It is just formative. And then certainly if you don't get anything very interesting coming back, that's not good enough. And so having some kind of monitoring of how well students are doing it, I think, helps as well. But generally speaking, they do seem to appreciate the value. I agree.
And I do think you're right, the context is very important, but what I also emphasise is it's a safe environment.
Yes.
This isn't going to get out, you know, and
so.
I think that's important for the students to understand and be comfortable with, in fact.
Well, with any university course, that's normally the case, but with a MOOC, it isn't. It is open. Yeah. So, you know, lots of people could get to see it. So, I don't know. A few people do. Yes, you have to be quite careful there.